And we need to be as professional about writing as anybody in any other trade. You wouldn't have an electrician come to your house and then tell you that, well, I'm a pretty good electrician. I'm very passionate about electricity, but I don't really understand how electricity works.
Welcome to the show. I'm JasonShannon, author of the books The Zimmer Insurgency, The Hounds of Harrigan, and Tiger Blues. This is a podcast about indie writing, featuring excerpts, sample chapters, short stories, upcoming news, and interviews with a variety of other indie authors. Way back in the early days, there was an author with whom I traveled in somewhat overlapping circles. He was there promoting his debut novel, A Time and a Place. Online, I saw him sharing screenshots of Audacity with tracks labeled Chapter 1, 2, etc., and the captions that he had just recorded another. In 2019, I attended a book show that this author had organized in Whitby, and had just downloaded his finished audiobook off of Audible a few days earlier. I told him how remarkable it was for him to have done his own audiobook, and he gave me the advice, perhaps in passing, that if I were interested in audio, I should do my own, which seemed like a ludicrous idea at the time. But here we are, 7 years later, and I have 3, soon to be 4, if I can ever do the final touches on the Moon Panther, audiobooks out that I have recorded myself. And it's Joe Mahoney that I credit with first seeding that idea of doing it myself. This week I have Joe on to discuss his book, A Time and a Place, his writing journey, the press that he's founded, Donovan Street Press, now that he's retired and moved out to the East Coast, and more. Joe does a reading from A Time and a Place at timestamp 108:30. We have another Spotify comment. This one again comes from Alex Tilley. This is on episode 90 with Tatiana Obi. Alex says, I'm a huge Afro Samurai, Samurai Champloo, Cowboy Bebop fan, and will definitely be checking out Tatiana's work, especially Sister Samurai. Sounds awesome. Great interview. I found the setup for Sister Samurai completely, captivating and drew me right in. And as soon as I found that she had the audiobook done, I had to get my hands on it. And it is just a relentless action thrill ride the entire way through. It's not a long book, it's just novella length, but it is captivating from start to finish. So thank you, Alex, again for that comment. And now I give you Joe Mahoney. So is Lagavulin your favorite scotch?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to know the story?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. No, I don't want to hear the story. Yeah, that's why I invited you on my podcast. So, yeah. Well, I don't want to hear any stories. The story is, a couple of friends of mine, Rod Crocker and Paul Kennedy, were working in the studio in the CBC in Toronto. And this would have been, it was in the Broadcast Center down at Front Street. And they had just got back from Scotland, and they had they were doing a tour of all these distilleries because they were just interested they were doing an episode for Ideas on Scotch. And in this studio on the credenza, they had about 15 different bottles of Scotch that they had brought back with them from this tour in Scotland. And so I visited them in the studio with no idea what they were doing. And they're like, oh, Joe, you got to try some of this Scotch. So it was this amazing opportunity to try all these different kinds of Scotch, because I didn't really know much about Scotch before then. And so I tried, one, and I'm like, it doesn't really do much for me. And I went down the line, and I got to Lagavulin, which is this smoky, peaty Scotch. And, and this wave of warmth washes over me from head to toe. And I'm like, yeah, this is the one. Yeah. But by the time I had sampled them all, and you'll just have to trust me, this didn't happen often. It was after my shift. I wasn't working, but still I was in a professional setting, and I should have known better, but I staggered out of that studio after drinking all that Scotch. It was a little bit embarrassing, but I did learn which one was my favorite Scotch, and it was absolutely Lagavulin.
Yeah, I've had Lagavulin, I think once at a restaurant downtown Toronto, and I liked it. It's not my favorite. Maybe if I had, I don't know if I had just the regular 8 year, 12 year, whatever it is. Sometimes I go for the more aged varieties. I lean more towards the Japanese variety. And I know that every Scottish person out there is going to be like, that's not real Scotch. It's got to be from Scotland. And they can put the peat in it as well. And it for me is just smoother and more refined.
Well, I will have to try that. Yeah. But I did
Yeah.
have the opportunity later to in 2019, just before the pandemic, my we took my family to Great Britain and we went to Scotland and is able to purchase some Lagavulin there and bring it home. And it's all gone now. I need some more. I was
Yeah.
hoping
Whenever
that I'd become rich and famous and people would send me Lagavulin, but nobody has.
that's a hint for anyone listening to this right here.
Yeah. I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
Yeah, just with when I was in Japan, I attempted to do the same thing. There was one Scotch whose name I'm forgetting now that I had tried in Toronto at some Japanese restaurant. Apparently it's been discontinued, but I could still get a version of it in Japan, just like from a bar that still had aged varieties. But it wasn't as good as I remember. I discovered a new one, however, called Hakushu, which I had one glass of, and like, it was amazing. Unfortunately, it's like $200 to get a bottle of it.
Oh,
And I could only find it in like this dingy little alcohol shop, only cash. I looked at the duty free in the airport, and literally like the guy, like the server was helping another guy who was asking about the same thing about like he wanted this one as well, and they didn't have it. So I've yet to find it here in Canada or any way of getting it here.
sometimes you got to lay out that $200, you know?
Yeah, I just didn't have the cash on me, and it was also like I already spent so much money. It was my like last or second last night in Japan, so I was like, I probably should have, but
Yeah, see now I want to go out and find some Lagavulin somewhere and I'll yeah, and just lay out the money for like whatever it is.
so we have known each other for a while. Actually, we haven't seen each other in a number of years now. Time just flies as we were talking off mic here. But um, I told you off mic, I'll mention it to the audience as well, that when we knew each other, you had just come out with A Time and a Place, your book, and I had been following you online and was following. You posted these like screenshots of you recording it on Audacity. I recognize the program because that's what I used for when my friend would record for me. And you like cranked out your audiobook fairly quickly, as I recall it, as soon as you had your book out. Time and a Place was your first book. And then you told me at a show that you organized, like, oh, I think I'd said something like, I'm proud of you. It's amazing. Like, I was just had downloaded it the day before, but I wish I could do something like that. I don't have the talent for it. And you'd said something like, oh, it may seem daunting, but just try it out. And sometimes you'll surprise yourself, or I forget the exact wording you used. I didn't take your advice right away because I initially just kind of like, oh, no, no, he doesn't know. Like, I'll stumble and my voice doesn't sound right for the characters. But a few years later, I did get into trying it and eventually got some stuff out there. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Welcome. Yeah. I'm so glad that you did it because I will tell people to do that. And sometimes I'm afraid that I'm giving them advice or pointing them in a direction that may be leading them astray, because the equipment does cost a little bit, depending on what you get, what kind of microphone you get, whether you get a mixer or, maybe you have to upgrade your laptop or something. And then my fear is that, they'll find it really challenging and maybe give up, or they'll do it and then they'll not sell as many copies of the audiobook as they like. Um, but learning that you did it, I find that very heartening because I really do think, and I was telling you that I actually did an audiobook workshop yesterday in Somerset, Prince Edward Island, teaching people how to do it. I really do think that there is value in doing it. I think there's just because you're learning a new skill doing it. It's a creative endeavor, which I think is the main reason that any of us really should be doing what we're doing, writing, doing this kind of stuff. And also because, there's a million print books or ebooks out there, but there's far less audiobooks out there. So the competition is a lot less stiff. And people love audiobooks these days. So my daughters tell me anyway. They almost consume their fiction and nonfiction exclusively via audiobooks these days. So yeah, good for you.
Yeah, thank you. I believe audiobooks are the fastest growing book market out there, medium, I guess. And yeah, I love reading indie fiction. I've had the privilege to be able to read so many impressive authors in the past few years because I've really made an effort to just read more indie, but so little of it is available in audio for understandable reasons. It's a lot of work, or you got to shell out a lot of money to get a narrator to do it for you. But it's so nice when I, meet another indie author and they're like, oh yes, the books have also available in audio. I'm like, great, I'm gonna buy it right now.
Yeah, yeah. And can I ask you, so how have you done with yours? Like, tell me about this is the point in the interview where I turn the tables, and I start interviewing you because that's kind of my nature. But so yeah, tell me about the making of your audiobook and how that all went.
Yeah, so the first one I did, I've got I think 4 or 5 out now. But the first one I did was The Zimmer Insurgency, which was also my first novel, and that was very intentional as my bestseller. I wanted to get that one out first. I figured that would be the easiest one to do in terms of like character accents and what have you. But it wound up being like 11 hours long, which is a lot of work. And I had done short stories beforehand. I'd done sample chapters. I was kind of seeding the ground with the earlier episodes of this podcast. And then I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I sat down and I started recording. I'm like, if I can record one, not really chapters, but like scenes, like one chapter per day, it's, I think, 61 different scenes. Like that's 2 months. Okay, maybe budget 3 months because there's going to be stuff that comes up. It's the editing that killed me. And
Yeah.
I'm learning these editing tricks as I go. Like I knew some of it from the short stories beforehand, but then you try to stitch two different things together, and all of a sudden the audio levels are completely wonky between the two of them. Or I was speaking faster in the one chapter than in the slower chapter, and it doesn't line up nicely. And there was a few of them where I lost the recording because it was raining outside and the tin awning was like the sounding, or I couldn't record where I'm recording now with a nice open room in front of me, and I was sat at my desk with a wall in front of me. It all echoed back and ruined it, and that was like a 35-minute recording just gone. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was long and slow, but I mean, it's kind of like just writing a novel, right? Your first novel is probably also a stab in the dark, and you're kind of learning on your feet and trying to figure things out, and you're making missteps and have to go back and correct it or scrap chapters or scrap whole manuscripts. But eventually you get something done and you can look back at the work you did and be proud of it. And I am
Yeah.
greatly proud of what I've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you've recorded far more of your work than I have. I have some catching up to do. I just recorded my short story collection, Other Times and Places, but and it's going to be a much easier edit than A Time and a Place because I learned from A Time and a Place, and was able to record great swaths of it that won't actually require much in the way of editing. But still, there is some editing, so it will be a little bit before I get it out. But yeah, like you, I want to turn it all into audiobooks. Then I'll do my memoir, and then I've got another couple of books coming out, and I'll do them. And yeah,
Yeah, and the more you do it as well, the more you'll be able to speak for long stretches without speeding up your words or without stumbling or realizing if you're clicking your tongue or anything. And you'll get better at it so the editing becomes easier. Same again as writing a novel, that you're going to be able to write more consistently in your first draft to save yourself the headache of having to do so much work in the second or third draft.
exactly. Yeah, it's yeah, just to take a page off of the name of one of David Brin's novels, one of my favorite science fiction authors. It's the practice effect. The more you practice, the better and easier it'll be.
Yeah. Was that the same process for you for your audiobook? I know you had a career in the CBC, but I don't know what your sort of audio editing background was like when you first started recording yours.
Well, I have long been an extremely proficient editor. I learned to edit on tape back when I went to Radio and Television Arts at Ryerson back in the 80s, because everything was done on tape at that point. So we were cutting with a razor blade, and I got really good at that. Then in the 90s, working for the CBC, I've used many different editing programs, starting with something called DCART, which came from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And then we moved to Dalit and then Dalit Plus, and I used Sonic Solutions and Pro Tools and you name it. And I became an extremely proficient editor on all of those. And prior to that, I'd been an announcer at private radio stations, so I figured I had the whole skill set. I figured because when I was 16, I could read a 4.5 minute newscast on the air and not make a single mistake. I don't know how I mean, I knew that I could do it because I was a good reader. I'd been reading forever, but I think also the fact that it was live, you couldn't make a mistake because you just had to keep going. But when in my 50s, I thought, okay, I've got the skill set. I can easily turn my book into an audiobook, and I sat down to do it. I couldn't even read a single sentence without making a mistake. And I think it was because there was no live audience and much time had passed and I was older and I didn't have that same skill set anymore. And I was self-conscious hearing my work. And I also, even though I should have known better because of all the work I've done for CBC Radio, I didn't realize how much post-production work that would mean, all those stumbles. Because I thought, okay, well, I'll stumble, but that's fine. I'll stitch it all together. And I had a very similar experience to you. In fact, I think every single chapter I re-recorded at least once or twice, trying to make it perfect. Um, and since then, I've kind of changed my ethos a little bit. I'm not quite the same perfectionist that I was because I actually believe that the pursuit of perfection is a mistake. I think that we should pursue excellence because I think we can achieve excellence, but perfection, we don't even know what perfection is. So, but still, I wanted to make the audiobook as good, as excellent as I possibly could. Um, and it was a real learning process to realize that no, I needed to go back to the guy I was who could read a 4.5 minute newscast without making a mistake, because then it would go a whole lot quicker. So yeah, even with all my experience in radio, which literally at that point was probably like 41 years, there was still a learning curve, learning how to do an audiobook. I think A Time and a Place came in at about 11 hours, all told. When I was in production at CBC Radio, and then later I became a manager, but when I was in production, which is about 19 years, we did a wide variety of stuff. We, worked on typical radio shows like Morningside, As It Happens, Writers and Company, Quirks and Corks, all that kind of stuff. Just recording and packaging shows. Recording and processing the work of others. It wasn't recording myself, right? So, so I developed all these production skills. And then I was in the radio drama department for a decade. Again, recording actors and recording musicians for the music, but not recording myself. So, so I had pretty super production chops by the end of all that. But, I didn't have anywhere near the performer chops that were required for audiobooks.
When it came to writing the novel itself, did you always want to be a writer, or is that like a creative pursuit that just came up later in life?
Well, actually, all the time I was growing up, right up until grade 12, I wanted to be an actor. And I'm still not entirely sure why I think it was probably a wise decision to not have become an actor. And I certainly don't regret my life. I'm still super interested in acting, which again is a reason why I wanted to, turn my work into audiobooks. But at the same time, I've always written, like right since the age of 11. Whenever a teacher gave me a project at school to do, if I had the option to write some fiction, I would always take that option, and I enjoyed reading my stuff out to the class if I had the opportunity. And I took my first stabs at writing novels when I was 12, 13 years old. Still got those kicking around somewhere, and yeah, and I think just kind of gradually, like I don't think I necessarily thought that I could do writing as a career. Um, like some people I know, like, Robert J. Sawyer, who, just was able to completely make it a career. There's not too many people who seem to be able to do that. Stephen King and maybe other Canadian science fiction writers like Robert Charles Wilson. Um, but so I always thought that I would take writing seriously, but it would be a secondary profession until I was able to retire, which I did 3 years ago from the CBC after 35 years. And since then, it has been a full-time pursuit, writing and publishing, an extremely unlucrative full-time pursuit. As my wife says, so let me get this straight. So you're working more than you ever worked before, well, essentially making virtually nothing compared to what you made before. And I'm like, yeah, that about sums it up. But I do hope to change that eventually. That maybe if I live to the age of 150, maybe at some point uh, the uh, the compensation will begin to reflect the work put into it. But even if it doesn't, that's not why I'm doing it. So.
Yeah, and you're talking about Donovan Street Press there, your own publishing house, which we're gonna get to in a second. But to stay with A Time and a Place for a second, how did that novel come about, and when did you decide you want to sit down and actually try your hand at writing it?
So, A Time and a Place, that actually, I mean, the story behind it is kind of ridiculous, really. It's I don't remember exactly when I started writing it. I'm fairly sure that it was around the age of 22 or 23, I think. And I lived with some guys and was associating with a bunch of people who were hugely into writing. And one of the things that we did we would write stories with one another as characters in it. And we were kind of into horror and Lovecraft at that time. So uh, so I decided to write a few pages featuring my friends in kind of a Lovecraftian vein, but in kind of a ridiculous Lovecraftian vein, very tongue in cheek. So I wrote the first 5 or 6 pages of what would eventually become A Time and a Place with my friends, and so the characters in it, like, so basically, originally Barnabas J. Wildebeer was me, and Ridley was my friend Paul White, and Dr. Humphrey was my friend Paul Hallis, and there were some other characters that were based on real people. But then when I was about 31 or 32, I found these pages in a drawer and pulled them out, and I liked the tone of it. But I knew that it couldn't be my friends anymore, so I changed their names and it couldn't be myself. So I changed the names and changed it from first person to third person, and then wrote. And then because I didn't have the discipline or the skill, and I was working full time and raising a young family, I just kind of spun in circles with those first 3 or 4 chapters because I'd read so much. Like, I was fairly well read in, all forms of, well, many, especially science fiction and fantasy. And I knew the bar that I wanted to hit, but I didn't have the skill set to hit that bar. So I kept working on these same 3 chapters, trying to get them to that bar, which is a mistake. It was a huge mistake and a waste of a lot of time. So it wasn't until 2005 that we went on strike at the CBC. Well, actually, technically, it was a lockout. And we were locked out for a couple of months. And during that period, this was, kind of the golden age of blogging. I blogged the lockout. And I would come home and I would just write like a maniac about what had happened in the picket line. And I, by the end of the lockout, after about 2 months, I had a massive amount of material that I'd written that was, when I look back over it, I'm like, this is actually, I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of ranting and stuff, but still, it's of a certain caliber. And, they would only be 1 or 2 drafts each post. And I realized that the light bulb went on. It's like, holy cow, if I were to apply this to fiction, I could actually have an entire novel written by Christmas. So then I pulled out a time and a place and basically wrote it to the end between then and Christmas. It was like between, say, August or September and Christmas. I had the whole thing written for the first time ever. And then subsequently spent the next 12 years revising it to get it to that bar. And I am happy to say that, I mean, it's an unprofessional amount of time. Like, that's unsustainable. You can't have a writing career taking 12 years to write a novel. But at the same time, despite how it's landed commercially, I'm extremely happy with how it turned out. I'm glad that I took the 12 years. There isn't a single word in the book that I would change. It's exactly the book that I want it to be. And I do think it's to a certain person's taste. It's not to everybody's taste, but it's to a certain, I love the fact that you've read it or listened to it twice, and you also wrote a fantastic review for it that I deeply appreciate. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I try to do a review for any indie author I read. I mean, ideally for every author, but if you're James Clavell, you don't really need any more reviews from me. So it's definitely the indie writers. I know that some of them only have 1 or sometimes no reviews. So if I can do something to help them out, and I do enjoy the book. You mentioned there is it may not be for everyone's taste. I don't know if any novel is for everyone's taste.
Yeah.
And I think it's better to be authentic to yourself and pursue the story that you want to pursue than to try and water it down. Maybe that's not the right term, but to try and cater it to the widest possible market, because it's going to come off sounding inauthentic to a certain readership anyway. So I always give the advice, like, write the story that you want to write. Yes, you can take creative or constructive criticism to try and find out how to improve it afterwards, but stay true to yourself and write the story that you want to read. But that's ultimately why I am an author, is because the exact things I want to read, there's flavors of that on the market, but I haven't found it exactly. So I'm like, I'm going to fill the market there. If I want to read it, then someone else wants to read it as well.
I could not agree more. One of my favorite musical artists is Kate Bush, and she's completely that ethos right from the beginning. It was, as much as possible, her sonic vision of her material, and up until ultimately she parted ways with her record label and became, really a true indie musician. And you listen to some of her work, which I've actually just recently went through her entire catalog, because I read this amazing biography of her, which is called Under the Ivy, which I highly recommend if you're a Kate Bush fan. And you listen to some of her early work, and you're like, wow, that is like way out there. That's, she was not catering to anybody. And it completely speaks to me because, I mean, A Time and a Place, there's one thing in that book which is catering to the audience, which is the presence of alien cats. I thought, maybe people will find alien cats appealing, And maybe one of the reasons that you find the book palatable is because I see you have a bunch of cats hanging around you. But yeah, the reason it's on my mind is because on Amazon, I think it's Amazon.com, the rating for A Time and a Place keeps plummeting, and like it's got good ratings on Amazon in every other country, and it's got excellent like 4.1 rating on Goodreads, and it has a positive review from Publishers Weekly, which largely inoculates it in my mind from bad reviews. I'm like, if Publishers Weekly likes it, then there's got to be something going for it. But I have come to recognize that it's it's such an on-commercial book because, and I didn't even realize this as I was writing it because I just was writing what appealed to me, was that I was subverting all the tropes. And so like the hero, like the heroic character, like normally it's some square-jawed hero who comes and saves the day. I kill that guy, I think, in like the third chapter. He's like, yeah, he doesn't last long. And instead the hero is this, awkward kind of, slightly cranky, belligerent, guy. And so it's the Americans, they don't like it. And which may have bothered me a lot more before. I shouldn't even get into this. But it hasn't bothered the fact that Americans don't like it, that it doesn't necessarily appeal to Americans is maybe not bad. you know.
Yeah, maybe we'll just say some Americans there. So
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because
Yeah.
with Donovan Street Press, I'm publishing a couple of Americans, and I have many relatives who are Americans, and I love many Americans, but I'm not a big fan of your president.
yeah, I think that Americans are slowly realizing that a lot of us feel that way.
Maybe not slowly.
Crikey, blimey, a kookaburra ate my dingo. In a world where glaciers cover most of North America and Eurasia, nuclear tensions are high between Russia and Africa and the Aussie-based British Commonwealth. Join me, freebooting black marketeer John Galveston, as I try not to piss off the Ruskies, or get swindled into a game of spies with MI6 or the CIA, and along the way discover what some festy terrorists in South America think about women's fertility issues. Pick up Rain's Agenda today, a novel in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. And yes, you're guessing correctly that the audiobook is narrated first person in this bad Aussie accent. If you want 8+ hours of this, check out JasonMShannon.com/Rain's Agenda. For a limited time, you can get 50% off the ebook audiobook combo when you use coupon code Padre Azul at checkout on my website store. That's Padre Azul, the tequila. Details in the show notes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually about what you were just saying there about how, your Barnabas Wilderbear is a great name for him, by the way. But
Thank you.
yeah, he's not your standard heroic type of guy. And he's almost, I read him as like this sort of John Everyman type character where the reader has a very easy time putting themselves in his shoes. There's just something about it where there's like parts of him that are left kind of maybe vague and people can just insert themselves in that way. Like even the fact that he's like had no serious relationships and I think he's in his mid or late 30s at the time.
He's
He's
39.
carrying,
Yeah.
so he's carrying for his nephew, and he has this kind of family relationship which is also like not super close but not super distant. It's just kind of everything about it is like, was that intentional to write him as a sort of John Everyman character insert?
I think yes. It's, I mean, the evolution of that character. I said initially that the first 5 or 6 pages written when I was 23 or 24, he was me, And I was obviously a bachelor at that age, and so he became a bachelor. And because it took me so long to write that book, and I think a lot of people have this experience if they do take a while writing a book, that they kind of outgrow the book as they're writing it. And, as I was writing it, I was aware that it's like, I really want to move on to other subject material because this really reflects an earlier version of me. And so that character, Barnabas J. Wildebeer, the bachelor, and I very much wrote him as a sloppy, independent bachelor, um, reflected an earlier time in my life, my 20s, basically, because I got married when I was 31, and and then my wife spent many decades training me since to become civilized. But to answer your question more directly, there was absolutely an element of the everyman about him because I wanted to write him as how would an ordinary person respond to these extraordinary situations? Like, so you meet someone in your den who's broken into your house, who your best friend claims is a demon. How would a normal person react to that? And not that Wildebeer is 100% normal, but he's human. You know, he only has one special ability, which the demon gives him, that, in which he can't even properly use that. Uh, So, and then I gave him, you probably saw that I gave him a cold because so many times in my life, like I don't know about you, except during COVID, I get colds about twice a year. And then I have to go through life for like, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever with this cold. But then when you're watching television or movies or books, nobody ever seems to have a cold. They all seem to be perfectly healthy all the time. So I thought, well, what if our hero, he's like a normal, awkward, kind of grumpy guy, and he's coming down with a cold during all of this? How annoying would that be? And then it turns out that there's more to the cold, but still, it's essentially a cold. So yeah,
What you were saying there, I think you just kind of wedded two threads from what you were just saying with what you were saying earlier with how outgrowing the novel and also like not pursuing perfection because you'll never achieve perfection. You can only achieve excellence. I've had that experience as well, and I know other authors who will do the same thing where it's like, no, I want it to be perfect. I want it to do this. And you sit on it for 5, 10, 12, 15 years. At a certain point, like, do you not want to read or work on this anymore? Aren't you at a different stage in your life? I know it's sometimes I go back to some of my earlier works and I still enjoy them. I'm still grateful that I wrote them. Would I write the same thing now? Not saying I think differently. I'm just saying I'm at a different stage in my life. And I think that that's a real concern for a lot of writers. I certainly feel that now, where if I almost feel like the pressing urge, the ticking clock to be like, I have to finish this now because I will eventually move beyond the subject matter.
well, yeah, the ticking clock. I mean, my daughters, I'm now 61 somehow. Not entirely sure how that happened. I know theoretically how it happened, but my daughters have calculated that at the rate at which you write, Dad, we calculate that you should be able to finish about half another novel before you, shuffle off this mortal coil. Um, but I've also, after finishing A Time and a Place, I developed an addiction for finishing things. And I think I'd actually acquired that addiction earlier writing short stories because, finishing a creative work, or as they say, nothing is ever finished, it's abandoned. Um, Abandoning a creative work is quite satisfying because it's like, wow, like I created that. Now I can move on. Like for a reader, when you finish a book, you racing through the book that you love and you get to the end and you're like, wow, that was a great book. I loved reading that. Then you have this delicious moment of what book will I read next? And it's kind of delicious. It's like, and some people they get dismayed by the amount of books at their bedside or, strewn throughout the house. I was like, oh my God, I got such a pile of books to read. No, that's fantastic. That means that you have choice. So you have a library that you can choose from, and it's so delicious. And then you choose the book and you start writing it. Being a writer, I think, it's the same thing. You finish working on something, and it's so amazing. Like when I came up with the last line for A Time and a Place, which was actually, I'd finished it and had gone to the editors, and then we had the publisher's guy putting the book together, the book design, and it was only when he was doing that process that I come up with the very last line of the book, which I thought it's like, oh, this is the last line. And then I knew that the book was done, and it was done to as close to perfection as I could get at that point. But then that delicious feeling of, what do I work on now? What's next? That will take me 12 years. And the next one didn't take me 12 years, I'm happy to report. So,
well, that's the other thing. You'll get, I mean, most authors will gain speed as they go because you have a bit more of a roadmap laid out now.
Yeah, I knew how to do it, and I knew how not to do it. So, and my next project, which is called Captain's Way, which I serialized on Substack, and which will be hopefully published in the next 6 months, is absolutely a reflection of what I took away from A Time and a Place.
Well, we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that one, and you'll have to let us know when you have a release date.
I will do that.
Yeah, for your first book, Time and a Place, would you consider it like urban fantasy, portal fantasy? Like what bucket do you put that in?
It's certainly not urban fantasy, because it's set in half in the countryside in Prince Edward Island, a little bit in Summerside, and it's. I know we're not allowed to respond to critics, as writers. It's a terrible idea, terrible practice. Having said that, I will now respond to critics. There was one critic who, and I'll just say as well that I heard this great quote the other day about critics, what critics are. And I think it was Hemingway who said this: critics are people who watch a battle from afar and then come down and shoot the survivors afterwards.
Oh, that's great. I
Yeah.
heard Hemingway was quite brutal with the critics. I hadn't heard that exact quote before.
Yeah, I love that, because that to me is, because the creative work is in a sense a battle. And then, and they're just like, oh, look at them. They fought that battle, and there's the result of the battle. Now let's go shoot the survivors. So one critic said, they took a point or two off the rating because some of the geography of Prince Edward Island was wrong. Well, of course, it's a work of fiction. I made it up. I based it mostly on Prince Edward Island, and and then a whole half of the novel is actually set in 2 alien planets. We shouldn't criticize those. I guess I got those right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I took a few liberties with the geography of Prince Edward Island and Summerside. I tried to make it work because originally I was, it was a fictional place, and then I thought, no, I'm going to root this in a real geographical place. And I spent a day looking at maps of the shoreline of Prince Edward Island, and it's like, okay, where would Wildebeer live? That would actually correspond to the real. And there was no, there's no big caves in Prince Edward Island. So yes, mea culpa, I did make some of that up. But yeah, and now I've completely lost what your question was.
It was about what bucket of fantasy,
Yeah.
sci-fi subgenre.
Yeah. So so it's not urban. It's I think of it as 2 things, really. It's absolutely portal fantasy, because it's got kind of a magic gate that takes you through space and time. So that's, the essence of portal fantasy. Um, um, and that would include works like, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, anything where you go through some kind of a gate or a portal to take you to a different place and time, fantasy world. One of my favorite authors, Stephen R. Donaldson, his trilogy, the Covenant trilogy, The Unbeliever, that would be considered portal fantasy. So I love that stuff. And it's also time travel because there is a huge component of time travel in it. And it also, oh, and here's where I take on another critic. It's, and this is a little bit of a spoiler. I'll try to keep it unspoilery, but I very deliberately handled time in a certain way that I do not think has been addressed much. Like when you, most time travel that you read, there will be the, the multiple universe theory. You go back, you change something, and then the future changes, like Back to the Future. I was trying to do something different, and basically it's exploring the concept of temporal inflexibility, and one critic addressed that, saying that he was basically attempting to explore temporal inflexibility, but then there is temporal flexibility. He contradicts himself later in the book, and I've always wanted to talk to this person and go, where, how? Because no, I don't. as far as I can tell, unless I made a mistake, which I haven't realized yet, it's consistent. But yeah, so anyway, portal fiction and time travel.
And then how has your reception been in terms of like fitting that into that bucket? We talk a lot in this podcast about like subgenres and how to market things, how to place them. Amazon makes you fill out a whole bunch of like subcategories, and whether you're online or you're at an event, how do you market that, and how has the reception been?
Well, I mean, I've been forced to put it in those buckets, and I guess I'm really reasonably comfortable doing so. I don't really care about those labels much myself. Um, I do find it a challenging book to describe. I mean, it's kind of a strange thing as the person who wrote it, and yet not really understanding what it is that I wrote until long after, seeing the response to it. I've learned that because I do a lot of craft fairs in New Brunswick, because I like to get out and meet readers, and I like to hand sell books. I think that one of the best ways to sell books is to hand sell them. Obviously, you can only sell a few at a time, but that way. But I still think there's value in it, and I've learned that like you don't want to sell a product to somebody that they don't want, or that they're not going to like. You want to put the book in the hands of someone that's going to appreciate it. So how I've described it to people has evolved. And I would never say that I'm a great salesman, but so on the surface level, I would say this book is science fiction, fantasy, time travel, portal fiction. But I have learned now to add that it's not conventional. It's a bit of it subverts the tropes. And if you're someone who can appreciate a wildly imaginative ride that subverts the tropes, that may not go where you want it to go, then I think you will appreciate this book. And I think that you can see that reflected in the reviews on a place like Amazon, because you'll see that it has a bunch of 4 and 5-star reviews, and then it's got some, 1, 2, and 3. Like it follows a certain shape where it's polarized. It's a book that polarizes people. So people who want a comfortable, easy to understand read are not going to like it. People who like something different may really like it. So I wish there was labels like that that reflected that, So I've had to put it in the in the description, at the end. It's like, because just saying time travel or portal fiction or science fiction or fantasy doesn't really do it justice, I don't think.
I think that's the problem that a lot of us have is finding out how to describe it. And sometimes maybe we're a little bit too close to it, to forest for the trees, and boiling it down to an easy way of getting it out there is a little bit difficult for us.
Well, and I think sometimes we don't understand what we've written. There's a story about the guy who wrote, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a story that I heard about the guy who wrote Big Trouble in Little China, which is one of my favorite genre movies, directed by John Carpenter, and I don't remember the writer's name, but listening to John Carpenter and Kurt Russell discuss the movie on the director's track, they talk about how the writer himself didn't understand how they were approaching directing the movie, because he'd written it straight, but they did not shoot it straight. And so kind of a bizarre thing that you would have written something and then result in this movie that you yourself, having written it, don't even get, and I kind of think that's what happened to me with The Time and the Place.
We teased this a little earlier, but now you're also in the business of selling other people's work because you have Donovan Street Press. Tell us a little bit about that. How did this come about? And is there any authors of note that you want to shout out that you're carrying there?
Well, yeah, if we have the time, I'll shout out all of them. But yeah, so the way that came about, and in a sense, it speaks to a little bit about what you were saying of, like, okay, so we come up with these works, and how do you label them? They don't necessarily fit easily in the commercial shells. So, so the big publishers like HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, Tor, those places, it seems, I'm not hanging out with those guys, but it seems like they want a certain thing. They want, straight up. They don't want the tropes subverted. So to sell your work to them is a real uphill battle that may never actually even happen. So, and then as I get into my 50s and now, like I said, 61, I kind of realized that that's not my future as a writer. So I had a whole successful career with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. So so I've seen some kind of success. So I don't even necessarily need to be successful as a writer. How much success is one person owed in their life, So I've kind of gone through the process of leaving that particular ambition behind. And then because I'm kind of a do-it-yourself kind of person anyway, it just seemed natural to me to kind of take the reins myself and go, well, if those reindeer won't let me play with them, well, then I'll come up with my own reindeer games. And because I think the big publishers desire, to go with a certain product that is maybe more guaranteed to sell and be commercially successful. Like that's not going to work for a whole bunch of us. It's not going to work for the kind of work that I'm producing, and it wasn't going to work for a lot of my writers' friends. So it became necessary to create another entity that would work for us. So, and maybe we don't have the same deep pockets or the same access to distribution channels as the big guys yet, but we are still capable of putting out work that I think the typical reader would not actually understand the difference or detect any difference between what they're putting out and what we're putting out, in terms of the quality of the product, in terms of the quality of the book, in terms of the quality of editing, in terms of the quality of storytelling. we're tackling maybe different subject matter, but in every other respect, it becomes a question of taste versus quality. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you look for in terms of like genre, subject matter, storyline, quality when an author comes to you or when you come across a manuscript?
Well, I'm looking for something that I will love working on because, uh, as I've discovered over the last 3 or 4 years doing this, it's I'm editing a bunch of the books. Ira Naiman, another Canadian writer, volunteered to help me edit some books. So he has edited a couple. He edited one by David Gerald of Star Trek fame, a collection of short stories, and he edited most recently one of Mark A. Rayner's most recent books. And I've edited a bunch, and we need to work on stuff that we love because the the editing and the formatting of it is going to take a considerable amount of time. You're going to wind up reading it several times, um, because we really are super interested in making the quality indistinguishable from the big players. So we don't want typos. We don't want punctuation, grammar mistakes. I believe that as an indie writer and as an indie publisher, that the only way to compete with the big guys is to make it the same quality. And it drives me nuts. I mean, I'm a huge fan of indie writers and indie publishing, but I always find it very distressing if I pick up an indie book and start to read it and the editing is not up to snuff, Like it's like there's just spelling mistakes and or typos, or the punctuation is bizarre. Um, and I understand that everybody is at a different path in the learning curve, but I think, and this is something actually that I went to Rob Sawyer's masterclass in Saint John a couple of weeks ago, and one of the points that he made was that, well, if we're in the business of writing, um, and we're serious about it, then we need to be professional about it. And we need to be as professional about writing as anybody in any other trade. Like you wouldn't have an electrician come to your house and then, tell you that, well, I'm a pretty good electrician. I'm very passionate about electricity, but I don't really understand how electricity works, or I don't know how to wire a three-way switch. I could do a two-way switch, you know. So I think as writers, and as indie writers and editors and publishers, we owe it to ourselves and to our readers to understand our craft and be as professional as possible.
Yeah, the thing that always gets me when I'm seeing this less now, but I used to see a lot more where it would be double spacing in the paragraphs rather than putting an indent, or the indent is the standard Microsoft Word double-sized indent, or the margins are just all wrong, and it's like it looks like you've just printed off a Word document in a 6:9 format, and maybe the story is still great, but it's when I open that book, that's the first thing I see, and I'm like, this does not look like you have put the finishing touches on this. How can I trust that you've done everything else right?
Well, yeah, because I think like it's okay to challenge the reader. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's okay to be creative with formatting. Like you read the two Alfred Bester classics in science fiction, and he plays with that. He'll do weird things with the typesetting, but it serves the story, and it's when he's doing it deliberately, and that he's doing it deliberately. But if you encounter it in a book and it's there because they just don't know how to do it properly, then that's something different. So,
Now you're a busy man because in addition to writing and doing this publishing house, you also have your own podcast, the Recreative podcast. Um, how did that one come about? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and the busyness is becoming a bit of a problem because I've got a backlog of all this stuff and a life to live. So I'm actually at the moment I'm trying to not accept any new projects and just get through all the ones that I have. But uh, the podcast, it kind of seemed like a natural evolution because I mean I've been in radio since the age of 16, and that's a huge part of my skill set. And I'd seen other people doing podcasts, it was just something that I had to try. But I didn't want to do it myself. I thought it'd be a lot more fun with somebody else. So, and I thought back to I actually thought back to I went to Worldcon Anticipation in Montreal, and I can't remember what year that was. Maybe 2007, something like that. And I hung out with my friends Fergus Haywood and Mark Rayner and his brother Mike Rayner and another friend Annette most of the convention, and we just had such a great time. We'd go to all the panels, and then we'd go for dinner and a drink afterwards, and laugh our fool heads off, talking about science fiction and writing and fantasy and anything else that came about. And it was just such a good memory that I thought, one of those people would be fantastic to do the podcast with. And so I settled upon Mark because he has a very active writing life. He's had many books out now, some recent ones, one of which we just published with Donovan Street Press, The Gates of Polish Horn, which was mentioned in the Toronto Star. So quite successful with that. So I invited him to do the podcast with me, and he jumped at the chance. And we just, it was a kind of the same kind of learning curve because I had the production side of it down, but learning how to interview people, even though I'd witnessed, some of the best people in the field conduct interviews at the CBC, doing it yourself is quite a bit different, as you have no doubt discovered doing your own podcast. So, and our goal was to at least do 100 episodes, and I think we're over 80 now. They're not all out yet. I think we've had maybe 75, 76 out, and taking a little break over the summer, and then we'll pick it up again in the fall. But I think, as you've also discovered, just meeting people this way and talking to them about stuff that we love and learning about new stuff, it's really addictive, like it's a bunch of work because I don't like to just record them and then just put them up. I like to record them, and then I like to edit them and try to make the guests sound as good as possible and make it as sonically pleasing a listening experience for the listener as I can. And it's the same kind of ethos of, competing with the big guys. To compete with the big guys, you have to be as good as the big guys, or as good as you can possibly be. So, yeah, so it's been a lot of fun, especially doing it with Mark.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one thing that always drives me crazy is when the two people on the podcast will have their decibel levels at different levels, and you have to increase the volume, and then all of a sudden your eardrums are blown out. So yes, I try to always, same thing as with writing. You want to try to appear as though you have a whole production team behind you, that, a sound mixer that's going and finishing all this. And what you were saying with, I talk to writers on this podcast because I've always enjoyed hearing from other authors about their process, about what they're working on. Occasionally, I would get to do that back in the day when I met someone like yourself at a book show and just chat for a little bit. But then the next show might be 2, 3, 5, 6 months away, and I might not see another author there, or someone that's not interested in talking. So yeah, that's and hopefully my own podcast has improved as time has gone on. I know, yeah, what you're saying with the interviewing people it's a skill set as well. And I want to keep them, I want to give them enough rope they can promote their stuff and not cut them off or make it sound like it's a CNN interview, but also not have them ramble on for 15 minutes where they're
Yeah.
completely off topic. And I'm like, I can feel the listeners tuning out or skipping ahead.
Yeah, and not everybody has that ability, and to be interesting, and I know that I've kind of rambled on a little bit in this one because I think one of the dangers of being a writer that probably most writers have experienced is, people in polite society will maybe make the mistake of asking you about your writing, and then early on you will make the mistake of telling them, and and I could just see within 30 seconds, you just see they're like, oh, wonder what I should have for supper tonight. Oh, is he still talking? you know so I mostly don't even do that anymore, and yeah. And for God's sake, don't tell people the plot of your next book.
Then you're committed to it.
Well, no, it's just they don't want to hear it. You know.
They
And the
want to see the
best way
finished
to
product. Yeah.
write the damn thing. Make it so that the only way that this story gets out into the world is if you finish it.
No, for sure. And you've been great so far tonight. You said you rambled on, but everything you've done is great. There's a few people, I won't name them, but it's like pulling teeth to try and get them to actually talk about their book in a sort of detail, or they'll go off on some tangent and it's like, can I steer you back to your own novel here?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. They're probably just happy for the opportunity to talk about something that usually makes people's eyes glaze over. So
All right, Joe, we're gonna do a reading in just a second, but before that, where can people find you?
I think the easiest place to find me is DonovanStreetPress.com. You'll find all the books for Donovan Street Press there, and you'll find links to my own webpage, which you can also get to via joemahoney.ca. And I do a lot of stuff on Substack these days. Probably just search for, well, you know what? Go to DonovanStreetPress.com or joemahoney.ca, and it will take you every place that you need to be.
They tried to disappear her in a black jail. Now it's time for her revenge. This is the premise of my first novel, The Zimmer Insurgency, a fast-paced techno-thriller in a dystopian world. In the year 2165, when an authoritarian government dominates all of North America, Kayla Zimmer, a political prisoner who escaped an unregistered prison in Haiti, is now trying to strike back against the system. Taking place in a mere 22 hours, The Zimmer Insurgency is an action-packed, politically charged sci-fi thriller of epic proportions. Check it out today in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. See JasonShannon.com/The Zimmer Insurgency for details.
Sure, yes. Let me go find a copy of A Time and a Place. And I don't have to wander far, so just give me 1 second here. Through some weird fluke, I actually opened it up to a spot that I think is not a bad spot and shouldn't take more than an hour and a half. So, okay, here we go. Each transition through the gate was different in its own way. This time was no exception. It began with the sensation that I was falling. The earth flipped into and out of view. I beat my wings, and the horizon stabilized before me. I glided for a while, trying to get my bearings. Not far ahead, a seagull drifted on the same current. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. Jerry should be here somewhere, and Humphrey. My wings? I angled my head to see. Air rushed past me with a whoosh that only now registered on my consciousness. Wings? I had wings? Complete with feathers. Were they mine? I lifted the right one up to see. It was my wing, all right, upholstered in white feathers with a smattering of gray. The maneuver, together with the shock of discovering that I was a bird, threw me into a stall, and I plummeted earthward. This was not good. I had never flown in an aircraft of any kind. I had no experience flying anything more than a kite. Down I went. I began to spiral. I tried flapping my wings, but it was no use. The force of the wind had glued them to my sides. Before me, the ground loomed large. Briefly, I wondered if I would feel anything when I struck the earth, or if death would come fast enough to cheat pain. I was not keen to find out. When I had been trapped in Sweep's mind, it had been different. Then, Sweep had been in control. Why was I in charge now? The bird should be in charge. It knew how to fly, not me. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe, as with Sweep, I was hitching a ride on the bird's consciousness. I needed to get out of the bird's way and let it do what came naturally. Holding on to the seagull's faculties with a death grip was not the answer. I forced myself to relinquish control. Once the seagull was back in the driver's seat, it responded instantly, riding with the dive instead of fighting it. It forced its wings even closer to its body and pointed its beak straight downward. We picked up speed. I would have been terrified had not the posture felt exceedingly natural. Just when I thought that it was too late to pull up, that we were about to burrow beak first into a wharf, the seagull spread its wings a hair, and we leveled off. Soon, we were gliding naturally over Port Carey out into Malpak Bay. My terror was replaced by a feeling of exhilaration. We were flying. Now, if only we could avoid crashing into the cabin cruiser looming out of the fog. Several people were standing on the deck watching us. Certain that we were about to collide into the side of the boat, I wanted nothing more than to take over and beat the seagull's wings furiously to avoid impact. I resisted the urge. Sure enough, with a flick of its wings, the seagull altered our trajectory, and we cleared the upper deck with inches to spare. The seagull circled the boat a couple of times, then descended to perch on a railing to collect itself.
Joe Mahoney, thanks for coming on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. We'll have you on ours one day.
I look forward to it.
Thanks so much to Joe for coming on the podcast. I wish him well with his retirement, although it sounds like he's busy. Busier than ever. Next week, I will be talking to Christy Lee about her newest book, Mr. Brightside. I've also got Christian Marchioni coming back on in a few weeks with his newest book, The Murder of Arnold Bueller. R.W. Duder will be talking about the second book in his Amy series. I've got Garrett Van Eck. I've got Garrett Van Eck and Meg Lush coming on to discuss their books as well. Make sure to subscribe to not miss out on any of that. I will be at the Flamborough Book Fair at the West Avenue Cider House in Freelton, Ontario on July 26th. The BlueberryBlast Festival in Nipigon for the weekend of August 14, 15, 16. Cogsand Clockwork Steampunk Festival in Fergus on September 12th, and I will be at CanCon this year, that is in Ottawa, on the weekend of October 16 through 18. Taming the Laser Leopard. Taming the Laser Leopard. Taming the Laser Leopard, the next book in the Yang Yoshiko. Taming the Laser Leopard, the next book in the Yang Yoshiko Extended Universe, will be coming soon. Subscribe, join my mailing list, or follow me on social media, or do all three to stay up to date on that. Cheers, everyone. All right, until next week, cheers, everyone.